The easiest way to start typing your own recipes into Cookin' is to click the New Recipes button on the toolbar. The New Recipes screen is divided into 3 tabs. There's the Edit Recipe tab, which comes up and appears by default. There's also the View Recipe tab, and as you can see, this is blank right now because we haven't entered anything yet. And then finally, there's the Categorize Recipes tab, which lets you organize your recipes into different categories and kind of label them and tag them as favorites and so forth. For now, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Edit Recipe tab. And when you look at this screen, you'll notice that it's divided into 3 main sections: the Details section, the Ingredient Listings section, and the Directions section. The cool thing about this is that each of these can be expanded and collapsed to give you more space on the screen. So if I wanted to work on the Recipe Details part, I can expand this, and now I've got lots of space here to work. And when I'm done with that, I can collapse it and open up the Ingredient Listings section, and now I've got plenty of space where I can see lots of ingredients. And finally, when I go to type in the recipe directions, I can expand this one, and I've got plenty of room here to work. For now, I'm going to go ahead and expand these so we can see all 3. And at the top of the Recipe Details section, you'll see there's a place here for you to choose which cookbook you want this recipe to go into. By default, it fills in the Ultimate Cookin' Cookbook, which is the only cookbook that I have in my database right now. But I don't want my new recipe to go in there. I want it to go into a new cookbook that I'm going to create called Dan's Recipes. So I just type it in, and then when I press Tab, Cookin' says, "Wait, are you trying to create a new cookbook?" And I say, "Yeah, quick add it." And then the cursor starts blinking here in the chapter field, and I'm going to call this chapter Desserts because I'm going to enter a desserts recipe. And when I press Tab, again, Cookin' comes up with this new chapter. Are you trying to enter a new chapter? And I say, "Yep, quick add it." And after I do that, you can see that Cookin' already went ahead and created a new cookbook called Dan's Recipes with a desserts chapter inside. So now I'm going to enter the recipe name. I'm going to enter a brownies recipe. And before I press Tab to go to the next field, I'm going to point out here that this recipe edit window is filled out already with gray text. This is just a recommendation to kind of show you what you might put in each of the different fields. And when I press Tab, this is going to go away. See how it disappears right there? So it stays there for a moment so you can see what you might want to put there. And then when you advance to that field, it disappears. This gray text will show up the first 5 or 6 times that you enter new recipes, and then after that you won't see it again. In the description field, I'm going to put in here by Kim Capizzoli. That's my sister. She gave me this recipe, so I'm going to enter that there. And then when I press Tab, Cookin' advances to the Serves field. And this is where you can tell Cookin' how many people this recipe serves. And you might be tempted to skip this and go, I don't really care about that. But you should take the time to do it, because later, if I leave this at 1 by default, for example, later, when I analyze the nutritional value of this recipe, it's going to come out with like 5,000 calories. You're going to say, whoa, why are the calories so high for this recipe? And the reason is because the way you entered it, if Cookin' thinks that you're going to eat all 12 brownies, this whole recipe that makes 12 brownies is going to serve 1 person. So it's going to say, wow, the calories per serving is really high. So we don't want to leave this at 1. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I'm going to say, no, this is going to serve 12 people. These checkboxes are unchecked because I don't want to adjust the recipe right now. I'm just setting this value. So I'm just going to click OK after having entered 12. And I'm going to press Tab. And this is where I can say makes 12 brownies, something like that. And this yield field, that's optional. You can do that if you want or not. It's not really going to affect anything. But this prep time field and cook time field is kind of important, because later when you search your recipe database by clicking on this magnifying glass right here, or the search button, you'll see that when you search your Cookin' recipe database for recipes, that you can specify and say, you know what, show me recipes that can be prepared in 30 minutes or less, and you can specify that. And so that works really cool. It's kind of a neat feature, but it only works if you enter these values in here. So for the prep time, I'm going to say 10 minutes. And for the cook time, I'm going to say 20 minutes. And when I press Tab, Cookin' advances to this ingredient listing field, and you can see all the gray text disappeared. But before I get to this part, because I want to take some time explaining that, I'm going to go over a couple other things. You can rate your recipe here, and I can say, you know what, this is a 4-star recipe, and I can just click that. And again, when you go to search your recipe database, you may say, show me recipes that have a rank of 4-star or higher or something like that. But again, that only works if you actually rank your recipes and rate them. The other thing I was going to show you is that you can add photos to your recipes. So I can click this button right here, and I can choose a recipe photo from my file system. So I've got a brownies JPEG photo here, and when I click to this view tab, you can see that that recipe appears, and you can see it's starting to get filled out now. It's got the recipe name and some of these other fields and some of this other information here. The ingredients and the directions are blank still. So I'm going to go back to the edit tab, but it's kind of cool to be able to add your own photos to your recipes. You can add videos too. Just click this add video button, and if you happen to have a video that you shot, you can select that as well and attach it to this recipe. And you can enter recipe directions as well. Down here, for example, you can say preheat the oven to 300, and you can type in degrees Fahrenheit. But the other thing that you can do is go back, and you can go up here to the edit tab and click insert degree symbol, or Control D. So if I click this, it puts in the little degree symbol there. Or if I'm typing and I don't want to click up there or reach for my mouse, then I say preheat the oven to 300, and then I press Control D, and it puts in the degree symbol for me. Butter and flour, 8-inch, and so forth. So now you just type in your directions. I'm not going to waste your time by typing all this out, but that's the idea there, is you can type that. And then finally, let's go ahead and take a look at this ingredient listing section now. And to show you that, I'm going to collapse this, and I'm going to collapse the directions too, so we've got lots of space. And now that we can see this and there's nothing distracting us, I'm going to go ahead and start entering the ingredients. 3, and then I'm going to press tab, and I'm going to start typing the unit, which is cups. And as soon as I press C, I see the unit cups at the top of the list. And once it's at the top, I know I don't need to keep typing anymore. I can just press tab, and the ingredient is flour. And as soon as I press F, I see that the ingredient flour appears at the top of this list. And once I see it at the top, then I know I don't need to type anymore. I can just go ahead and press tab, or press the enter key, and that ingredient line is now done. And I can type in 4. Now the unit is for 4 large eggs. There is no unit because large is not a unit. Large is more of a descriptor. There's not like 2 larges in 1 cup and 4 wholes in a quart and so forth. So I mean, descriptors like whole egg or large or medium or small and so forth, those aren't really units, and so those would go in the ingredient info. They kind of describe something about the ingredient. And so I'm going to now type in large, I'm going to press tab, and the ingredient is eggs, so I press E, and there it is. Cooking auto fills it. Eggs is at the top, and once I see that, I can just hit the enter key and go to the next ingredient line. The next ingredient is 1 cup of sugar, SU. Now I see sugar at the top, so I just keep typing until sugar appears. And once I see it at the top of the list, I just press tab, and it fills it in for me. And then I say comma sifted. So this is kind of ingredient information about sugar. It needs to be sifted. So I'm going to type comma space and then sifted, and then hit enter. And then 1 cup of brown sugar. There, I just typed BR, and it filled it in. And this is sifted as well. And you can see there's this brand column that I've been skipping. Most of the time, probably 99% of the time, you're going to skip it. But in some recipes, when you make this particular recipe, for example, you might need to say, you know what, you have to use gold medal better for bread flour for this recipe. It's got to be this particular brand. Otherwise, it's not going to turn out. And that's why we have this field here. So occasionally, you might need to specify which particular brand, but most of the time, you don't need to do that. Now, if you're wondering, why do I have to break the ingredient lines up into their component parts? Why can't I just type it out? It would be so much easier. The reason we do this in cooking and divide each ingredient line into these parts is so that we can adjust serving sizes, for example. If I want to quadruple this recipe or maybe cut it in half or into thirds, cooking will actually adjust the units for me. Let's take a look at that now. So I'm going to expand the details section so I can see the serves button here. This serves 12 people, but let's say I have a small pan and there's just the 2 of us home and I don't want to make a whole huge batch of brownies. I can click this and I can say, no, I only want to serve 2 people, and I want you to go ahead and adjust the recipe quantities, that's this column, and also adjust the units right here to find the best match. And when I click OK, Cooking, you see, changed from cups to tablespoons here to make it easier for me, so I don't have to measure out like 1/12 of a cup, which, I don't even know how I do that. So that's one reason why we break it into the component parts. The other reason is because we want to be able to identify the actual ingredient itself without all the descriptor information, so that we can analyze nutritional value, so that we can organize each of these items into aisles when cooking makes a shopping list, and so forth. So there's a number of reasons why we break each of the ingredient lines into their component parts. And it actually makes it easier to enter your recipes too, because you don't have to type out the whole word tablespoon, for example. I can just type in 2 1/2 tea, and there's teaspoon, so I'm not there yet. The easiest thing to do is I could click this. But what you want to do is leave your mouse aside when you're entering ingredients, and don't reach for it ever, and just type and leave your fingers in the home row. So I see tablespoons there, so I'm going to just keep typing, and I'm going to press A. And now that I see tablespoons at the top, I'm going to go ahead and press Tab. And so it only took 2 keystrokes to type in the word tablespoons. If you're really bent on it, you can do it the other way. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to click this delete the selected ingredient button. I'm going to click delete, delete, delete. So I removed everything. And we have what we call this Snagit automatic ingredient entry. And if you're really determined to do it, you can type in 4 large eggs, 1 cup sugar sifted, 1 cup brown sugar sifted, and so forth. And when you're all done, you can click OK, and Cooking will then go through and parse each line and break it up into its component parts for you. But it's really much easier to just type it in yourself, because it's going to take fewer keystrokes, and it's not that hard once you get the hang of it. The Snagit feature is really handy if you happen to have your recipes already in an electronic format. For example, here I happen to have this document with basil marinated chicken breasts and several other recipes. And if I don't want to, retype these, I can just highlight this and copy it. Copy, and I can go back to Cooking, and I can click on this Snagit button, and then I can right click and choose Paste. And when I click OK, Cooking's going to then go ahead and parse each of these ingredient lines into their component parts. So if you can copy and paste your recipes, definitely use that Snagit feature. It's going to be way easier than typing this in. But if not, go ahead and type this in, and as you're doing this, you're going to get the hang of it, this autocomplete feature. If my recipe calls for 1 6-ounce jar, and I type 6, and right away I see 6-ounce can, 6-ounce packet, I could keep typing -ounce, parenthesis, and so forth, but jar is right here, and remember, we're not using our mouse. I'm just only using it as a pointer right now. Instead of finishing this, I'm going to move my mouse aside. I'm going to hit the space bar because I'm already on the 6 ounces part, right? So I'm going to hit the space bar and type J for jar. And right there, Cooking lists all the units that have both the number 6 and the letter J in them. And right away, 6-ounce jar comes to the top. So I just typed in 6 space J, and Cooking filled that in. So now I can just, now that it's at the top of this list, I can just press Tab. And it was really easy to enter that in, because I only had to type 2 keystrokes. Similarly with your ingredient list, if it's wheat bread, I press W and then H and then E, and now I'm to all the wheat things, and there's bread, and wheat germ is at the top. Instead of finishing and typing AT, now that I'm already to the wheats, I'm just going to press space and go to the next word, which is bread. So I'm going to type B for bread. Oops, I hit the wrong key. B for bread. And now wheat bread is at the top of the list. And so I can just hit enter. So just with only a few keystrokes, what is that? W-H-E. And so 4 keystrokes. So when you get the hang of this autocomplete feature, 14-ounce, let's say it was a 14-ounce bottle. Instead of, like I said, typing 14, I'm going to just press space and then B for bottle. There it is, 2 14-ounce bottles. Oh, the other thing that's neat about having these broken into their component parts is that Cooking knows when to make this plural and when to make it singular, and it does that with the ingredients too. So if you adjust your serving sizes, instead of 4 tablespoons, maybe it's going to be 1 tablespoon. So Cooking will know when to take that S off or when to add it again. Like if I double this recipe, it needs to say 2 cups, and if it called for 1 egg, and I doubled it, Cooking would know to add the S to the end of the word eggs. So, look at this is getting chopped off here, by the way. You can hover over this and see what it is, but you can also just grab this and drag it. So these columns have these little grabbers, and you can adjust them to however, like I may not need this much space for the quantity, so you can totally adjust the width of these fields, and if you don't use the brand one much, you can move that aside and so forth. So you can totally control the layout of this. So that's how you enter your own recipes into Cooking. When you're done, you can go down here and click Save, or if you want to enter a new recipe right away, you can just click Save and New, and it'll open a new one. But remember, whenever you do this, you want to try not to use your mouse at all. I have been moving it and clicking and pointing, but mostly just so you can see what I'm talking about. But when I enter recipes, I put my mouse aside and I don't touch it at all. And in order to click the Save and New button, you can see the letter N is underlined right here, and the letter S is underlined. So when I want to do Save and New, I just press the Alt key and hold it down, and then I press the letter that's underlined. So when I press Alt and then the letter N, Cooking saves that recipe and opens a new one, so I can start typing right away the next recipe. So you can type them in, boom, 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 save and new, boom, 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 type in your recipe, save and new. So it makes it easy to enter your recipes quickly. Here's the brownies recipe in the desserts chapter of my Dan's cookbook. And I want to go back to this for a second, and you can see when I click to the View tab that this recipe looks pretty cool. I can change this theme, by the way. This is the notebook theme. I'm going to click Options, Change Theme, and I'm going to choose corkboard because I think it's kind of cool looking. I just double click on it, and now the recipe I just entered shows up like it's on a corkboard. It's pretty cool, huh? The other thing you can do is you can email recipes, you can post recipes on Facebook, you can pin them on Pinterest, you can tweet recipes, post them to Google+, you can link to them if you want to send a link to somebody, like a URL, and you can embed your recipe in a web page, and Cooking formats it all for you. So those are some of the features. This button here will go to the next recipe on this list. There's only one here, so I'm not going to click it right now, and this will go to the previous recipe. So if you're looking at the Ultimate Cooking Cookbook, for example, you might want to just click Next, Next, Next. It's like as if you were turning the pages in a cookbook. Next, 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 and it's kind of cool. Well, that's it. I hope these tips on entering recipes were helpful to you, and I hope you love cooking.